Begini. Cek, cek. Is my voice clear? Ada suaranya nggak? Kedengaran ya? Is it clear? Oke. Okay. Kita cek dulu di chat. Okay, thank you. So my voice is clear, yeah? Great. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, Wilujeng Enjing. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here in this online seminar or Sedaring, seminar daring, sponsored by Balai Bahasa Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. Thank you very much, Ibu Bapak, teman-teman semua, that you participate in today's event, where I will share with you a recipe to make a compelling presentation in English. So why recipe? You know, the fact that I cannot cook doesn't stop my responsibility to cook. I have to cook. I have to cook so that I can eat, and I also can serve at least decent food for my family. So there are days where I can cook amazing food, but there are days where the quality of the food that is so bad that no one can handle the taste of my food. But actually, whether I cook good food or not, I always look at recipe. But the problem is sometimes I don't follow the recipe faithfully. I always adjust. I always adjust to my situation, what I have in my fridge, and also my family's condition. And that kind of experience inspires me in doing presentation as well. Inspires me in making the title of today's presentation, a recipe. So why a recipe? So this is only one way, and actually you can adjust and modify the principle or the recipe to your situation. When I cook, I often nervous, especially if I have to where I have to serve the food for people outside my family member, because for my family member, they don't have any options, so they just have to accept that. So the same thing with presentation. Like now, when I start my presentation, I always feel nervous, I feel trembling, my heart beats faster, and I don't know with you whether you have that kind of experience too or not. But my experience, what I always experience before I do my presentation, I always feel nervous. And in fact, at the moment, maybe many of you can see that I'm quite nervous because this is my first experience doing presentation online like this, where I cannot see the audience. I cannot see you. You can see me, but I cannot see you. So I cannot really receive immediate feedback from all of you, whether you are there or I'm just talking here by myself, just to my computer. Now, in this presentation, okay, you have read that one. Okay, so the menu for today's presentation, we will do the survey here. I'm going to ask you some questions, or there will be polling that will ask your presentation experiences. And then I will move to the basic principles of doing presentation. And then I will share with you my journey of doing my presentation and what kind of ingredients that I discover throughout my journey in presenting. And then I will share with you the steps to cook the presentation. And now, as you can see, I'm still trembling. I'm still nervous because I know that many of you expect to have something from me. And I know that maybe in some audience, they will make some judgment about the quality of my presentation. But you know what? The show must go on. But before we talk more about presentation and how I can calm myself down so I can convince you the recipe that I create. So I have to really have control of my nerve, of my nervousness throughout this presentation. But let's just go on to the survey. So you will see on your screen, there will be polling from Zoom. Yep. Wait. Yes. Do you see the polling in your screen? This is one of the things that I'm worried, what makes me nervous when I experience new event of presenting something, because there are things that I don't really have control, even though I have rehearsed and we have, the committee and I have tried to show this polling, because I can see the polling on my screen, but I'm not sure. I don't think can you see the polling now? Let's check. I will type on the chat. Oh yeah, you can see the polling. Yes, thank you. So in the polling here, there are actually two things that I would like you to contribute. Yeah, the first one is about your ways to deliver an oral presentation. Oh, some people already do that. Good, good, good. So you may choose more than one options. And the second one is about the challenges that you face during the oral presentation, particularly when you use English. In the first question, that relates to your ways to deliver an oral presentation, whether you usually read the scripts, memorize the presentation, or whether you use dot points to present, or you can just talk spontaneously, or present impromptu speech, or read from the slide. And you can move on to the next one that relates to the challenges of doing the presentation. Sometimes we forget our lines, or maybe you lose the train of thoughts, and then maybe you make errors in pronunciation. You're nervous because you have lack of experience, just like what I'm experiencing at the moment, lack of confidence, nervous, fear of being boring, fear of speaking too fast or too slow. And you're also afraid that people will give negative views about yourself. So you're afraid that you're being judged because you present in front of lots of people. Okay, we still have 20 more seconds for you all to complete the survey before I end the polling, yeah? Okay, we still have 8 or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much. I need to end the polling now. Okay, let's see the results. Can you all now see the results? Let me check in the chat. Can you see the result? Yes, okay. Good. So, oh, look at this. Most of you use dot points to present. Yes, I think it's quite common way to present something, and you have dot points in your PowerPoint, and then you talk through the dot points. Yeah. And the second one, I think, like memorize the presentation. Yes, sometimes I memorize the presentation as well, particularly when the time slot is very strict, like 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but I don't think I can memorize the presentation for 1 hour long. So dot point is probably best. Read the script. Yeah, you may, yes. Read the script. It's like you have the slides and then you have palm cards, or you have your print out notes and you read from the script. Or you can also just read the slides directly, or you without needing any prop, you can just speak and talk to your audience. And now look at the challenges. The challenges, yeah. Nervous, yes, because that's what I'm experiencing at the moment. Yeah, and I'm still nervous. And then losing your train of thoughts, because we are nervous, sometimes when we forget, even though we have the dot points, but sometimes we think, what should I say about that? I can't remember. And what we do usually just move on, because yeah, again, the show must go on. And then errors in pronunciation. Yes, this is another thing for us who don't speak English as first language. Yeah, it's quite tricky, because when we present something in English, we need to make sure that our pronunciation is understandable by our audience. Yeah. And then fear of speaking too fast or too slow. I also have that kind of fear, because my tendency is to speak quite fast, but I need to control the speed or the pace of my presentation to make sure that the audience can follow my presentation. Okay, so now we know the results. Most of us use dot points to present, and the biggest challenge here, as we can see from the survey, is feeling nervous, the nervousness. Yeah. Okay, I will stop the result here, stop sharing the result, and go back to the slide. I hope that you are on the same page with me. Yeah. Okay, can you see? Hang on, why it's not moving? Yeah. So, do you see my new slide now? Let me check. I have to check constantly to the chat. Do you see my new slide? Yes. Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So before I share the recipe, it's very important for me to share with you as well the theory that underpins the recipe that I make. So Hallidayan functional language model underpins or informs the recipe that I make in presenting in English, about presentation in English. So in Hallidayan functional language model, he said that the way we use the language is not separated from context. So context and language system always influence each other. Yeah. The way we use the language is dependent on the context as well, and sometimes the context can be influenced by the language system as well. So here, when we talk about context, okay, why it doesn't work? Yeah. So when we use the language, the context will influence our linguistic choices, the choices of words, sentences or kind of phrases that we use. It depends on first the purpose. So what are the purposes of using the language? So what are the purposes of presenting our paper? It will influence the way we use the language in our presentation. And the other thing about context that can help us design our presentation is our knowledge about the audience, who will be the audience of our presentation, and what are the topic or the content of our talk, whether we talk about something commonsensical or is it something specialized, a specialized knowledge, and what kind of mode, what kind of channel, what kind of medium. Is it face-to-face or is it like online like this? It will affect the choice of words that we use. So basically this construct informs the recipe that I'm going to share with you. So, oops. So what are the purposes of presentation in academic setting? And usually when we present in academic setting like conferences or seminar, we would like to share our research that we have conducted, and we want to convince the audience that our research is significant, our research is important. So that's what we want our audience to agree with. And to convince them, we need to introduce to them the background why this research is worth conducting. Yeah. And there usually we have a formulation of research problem. We present the research questions and literature review, and how we conduct the research, how to collect the data and interpret the data, and also analyze the data. And we present as well the findings and discussion. And finally, we may want to present the conclusion and recommendation. Now we know the purpose of presenting in academic settings. So if you look at the theories by Halliday again, there are three things or three notions in the context of situation that can affect the choice or the language use. First, topics. So it's very important for us to understand the topic that we are going to present. So we need to know whether it is specialized one or is it, the topic is more like commonsensical. Because when we talk about something more specific, so we might need to explain some technical terms relevant to the subject or to the field that we are presenting. It's not only the knowledge about the subject, but we also need to know, or we need to have the knowledge of presentation structure. Because when we present our report, it's not like in a seminar, it's not like when we talk to our friends in a coffee shop. The language choice will be different. In presenting in academic setting, our English language proficiency will also take into account. Yeah. Because sometimes we know the subject, but it's hard for us how to explain that in English. We can explain that in Bahasa Indonesia, in our language, in our first language, let's say. But it's often hard to articulate that in English in a way that people can understand easily what we are trying to say to them. And then the second one is audience. So we need to know the audience of our presentation, whether we talk to people who have equal knowledge, like for example, our colleague or our friends in university, or if you are still studying, maybe your friends, your classmates, or whether you present your research proposal to your examiners who have higher level of expertise. With different kind of audience can also influence the language choice that you want to use in your presentation. And the second one, cultural differences can also impact on the choice of your language use. Yeah. When you speak like now, for example, I need to be aware that the audience have various cultural background, not only Sundanese, where I'm from, because I know that many of you come from different parts of Indonesia. Yeah, there are some audience and participants are from Manado, Lombok, Medan, and I know that maybe sometimes some topics in one particular province can be funny, but not for others, for people from other places. And sometimes one joke in one place can be acceptable, but in other places it can be offensive. So we need to be careful with that as well. The third one is medium or mode in Halidayan term. Here, I just use the word medium where when it covers the embodied performance. So when we present, when we present our paper or our work, we use gesture and also body language. But in online setting like this, maybe what you can see from the speaker is that just the facial expression and maybe the use of my hands. But maybe it's a bit awkward when I use my hands like this, at least for me, because I need to make sure that my hands can be seen. But I don't know whether the movement of my hands can really clarify the meanings or just make you even more confused and get distracted. But perhaps your facial expressions can be more prominent when you present in online setting like this. But again, as I told you, it's quite challenging because when you look at yourself in the camera, it tends like you want to check whether your eyebrows are okay or your eyes, or there's something, you have something in your teeth. You just check on that like constantly without realizing that actually at the other end, there are many people watching you. So that's tricky part. And that's what I learned from today's presentation. But in face-to-face interaction, embodied performance, the use of body language plays very important role as well, because people, uh, they tend to look at the visual prompts rather than hearing the verbal, because the verbal, or when they hear the words, it's like flowing quite fast and they cannot go back. But the visual, they have more time to look at the face or the slides like that. And yeah, and also the use of technological tools that support your presentation. In online setting, like now, for example, you need to know first your computer, of course, the computer that you use, and then you also need to know what kind of app that is being used to for the platform. And here we use Zoom. So I need to know that there are some features in Zoom, and I need to know how I can interact with you. And as you know earlier, that I keep checking with you whether you can see my slides or can you hear my voice, because it's important for me to receive feedback, because sometimes I can talk, my slides are okay, I can just go through my presentation, but in the other end, like in your screen, the slides actually don't move at all, or you cannot hear any sound. Yeah, so it's important. The basic principle, there are three things. So the topics, audience, and the medium. So you need to be aware of these things when you present. Okay. So now let's move on to my journey. Okay. When my experience in presenting in English, I started as students in UPI, and then when I did my master's and also my PhD. And typically my presentation is more like part of class assignment. And I don't really have lots, not, is it? I don't really have kind of nervousness, not as much as like now, but actually there are different kind of nervousness that we experience. In presenting our assignment, we know that our friends will judge, or at least the lecturer will judge the quality of our work. So when we present, we are aware that somebody is going to judge you. And I think it's quite natural for us as human beings to get nervous about that. Because we actually don't want to be judged negatively, especially after we work really hard. And then I also have experiences in presenting in national and international seminars, and usually the presentation lasts for about 20 to 30 minutes, and that may include question and answer session. And then I had my first experience in doing a panel session in IATEFL conference in UK in 2006. At that time, that was my first experience where I have to report my research in 5 minutes. And years later, I joined this competition, 3-minute thesis competition. It's where I need to present my research, at that time, my PhD research, which is very big and lots of things that I want to talk about, but I need to present that in 3 minutes. So that's very challenging. And then the next experience is when I was invited to present in TEDxU Wollongong. And at that time, the presentation lasts for about 15 minutes. So based on these experiences, I discovered some ingredients, how to make presentation interesting. So what are the ingredients? The first one, I need to know how much information is enough. So here, this is from my experience from IATEFL conference where I did panel session. At that time, what I presented, I understood clearly because I presented the work that I did. So I'm familiar with the subject matter. And the audience, they have the same background as English, as practitioner or expert in English language teaching. So the audience and I share similar area of interest. And what about the medium? The medium, the tools that we use at that time were like projector, and then there is no mic at that time, and the setting is face-to-face classroom setting. So I'm quite familiar with the environment for my presentation. But what was new to me was that this one that I highlighted in red font, unfamiliar presentation structure. So I'm familiar with the subject matter, but I'm not familiar with the presentation structure where I have to deliver my presentation in 5 minutes. And what I learned from that situation, so in designing the presentation within very limited time like that, it's very important for us to decide how many slides are we going to present in 5 minutes. But we need to make sure that we can cover the whole thing about our research, just like what I mentioned earlier about research structure, that I need to set up the background, I need to inform the audience why I need to do this research and how I did it and why it's significant for my context. So deciding how many slides and how many words can be very, very significant for this kind of situation. Remember, because I only have 5 minutes and I cannot negotiate like, oh, can you give me 2 more minutes or 5 more minutes because I haven't finished, I haven't come to my conclusion yet, or I haven't come to my finding section. The committee just, they won't care about that. That's not their problem, that's our problem, because they already inform us that you are given chance just to present your presentation in 5 minutes. Because in an event like that, usually they already arrange some presentation. So once finished, and then it will be followed by the next one. So it's very important to think about like how many slides, how many words, so how much information is enough. Yeah. So this is what I learned, that one slide, you can use one slide for about 1 to 3 minutes. And 1 minute can consist around 100 to 150 words. So I have tendency to speak fast. And maybe I can talk more. Maybe I can talk more than 150 words in 1 minute. But will I achieve the purpose of my presentation. I want to make sure that you agree with my idea, that I want to make sure that you are convinced, that you agree with my idea, that you know my research is significant and important. If I speak too fast, maybe no one really can get what I said. But the problem is sometimes when I try to speak slower, I have tendency to lose what I'm going to say. So it's quite tricky. And here, when I said one slide around 1 to 3 minutes or 1 minute around 100 to 150 words, it can be adjustable, especially for the use of slide. For my presentation, I usually one slide can last for 1 or 2 minutes. But there are people who use one minute of their time to present like around 50 slides. But it depends on the purpose. If, for example, your research is about animation, and then it's very important for you to just click through the slides very quickly, then it makes sense. So the audience can see the point of your work. But for my work, I can just use 1 or 2 minutes for one slide. Yeah. And now we come to the second ingredient, know your audience. So I learned so much about the importance of knowing your audience when I participated in this competition. This is in my university. When I studied my PhD, this is in University of Wollongong. At that time, I delivered my thesis. So I talk about my project, but I need to talk about that in 3 minutes. As you can see here, they display the time. So I am fully aware as I talk, as I present, the time went by. And I need to make sure if I don't want to be disqualified, I need to finish everything, setting up the background up to the conclusion or at least the findings of my research just in 3 minutes. If not, I will be disqualified. So it's quite terrifying for me at the time. Now, I also, from that competition, I learned again, when I look at these three things, actually, I don't have any problem with the subject matter because I presented my research, my work. So I know what I'm talking about. And then, but the presentation structure, which is 3 minutes, and the purpose is for competition, that is something new. So I need to cope with that kind of situation. And that is not the only thing that I need to cope at that time. I also need to learn about the audience because it's different from the first event that I already shared with you. The audience for this event are varied. They come from different or various kinds of educational background, not only people from English language teaching group, but there are many participants or attendees who work in medical school, in engineering, economy, something like that. And I need to make sure that they know, that they understand my research. So I need to be able to make the technical terms typically or specifically used in my area can be understood by these participants. And another thing that I need to think about is that it's not only the variations in terms of of educational background or field. I also need to think about the level of expertise of my participants. So they are just students, lecturers, but also there are judges, professors from different kind of area or subject matters. Like you can see from the picture here, people, like you can see maybe on the slides, there are 3 people in the front row. They are judges from different faculty. So they actually don't know about, let's say, even EFL or ESL. Those terms are commonly used in English language teaching. We know ESL, Many of us know ESL is English for second language and EFL is English as a foreign language, but many of them think if ESL is second language and maybe EFL is English as first language. So even the terms that sometimes I take for granted in my field, I need to explain that to the audience who are not coming from the same area. Yeah. Next one. So what I learned from this event. So it's very important for me before I do my presentation, or once I know that I'm going to present in some events, I need to know who the audience are, whether they are lay people or are they experts. And maybe you might want to know whether they are fans of quantitative or qualitative groups, or whether they are coming from sciences or social sciences, because it will matter. It will affect the language choice that you are going to use in your slides or in your talk. Because why do we need to go through this kind of maybe crazy things, like make you even busier, while you can just actually put everything in your slide and talk through, because you think you have sent the message across. But again, a compelling presentation is not only about you convey your message, but you need to make sure that your audience care about your ideas too. So it will affect the use of common sense keywords and the use of highly technical terms related to your field, or whether you need to give lots of explanation or less explanation. If you present in front of expert in your area, you might not need to explain technical terms. For example, in this presentation, when I introduce holiday and functional language model, I adjust the use of the term, because the three tenets that I introduced earlier in holiday and term, they are called as field, tenor, and mode. And I know, based on my experience, when I talk to people with no background in linguistics, it's a bit hard for them to understand those words. Even when I present in front of Australian at the time, they ask whether some words in English, and they ask, is it an English word? Well, actually, that is from functional linguistic theory. So that makes me realize that what we know in our area, sometimes we just take it for granted when we use it. But when you present it in front of audience, you need to be aware whether you need to unpack some keywords, or you can just keep the keywords as it is. Let's see the next ingredients. The third ingredient is to know your modalities, to know your potential, to know your environment of your presentation. Here, when I did TED Talk in Wollongong, in terms of the topic, again, they asked me to present my project. So I'm familiar with the subject matter. But again, I was not familiar with the presentation structure and purposes of presentation at the time. And now I know that the audience will be similar to the 3-minute thesis competition event, where the audience come from various educational background and expertise and field of knowledge. And the medium, there's a typical kind of tool like projector, and also a theater setting, and using clip-on microphone, and I'm not used to using it. And then also some lights. And there's some rule as well where I need to stand on the stage. So it makes me need to be aware with my movement as well. Now, at that time, what was challenging is the presentation structure and purposes. I know TED Talk, and I often watch the video by TED Talk and by TEDx, yeah. And at that time, I wasn't so sure. I wasn't confident when they asked me to present in their event, because I don't think I have the expertise, or I'm not that inspiring or something like that. Just like what I what I watch from TEDx. But I need to take this opportunity when they offer me the chance to present in their event. So I need to trust them that actually they believe in my capability, because actually I'm a kind of person who is very easily who is easily getting nervous. Like I have anxiety, especially even though sometimes it looks like I'm okay, because what I know is that, yes, I'm always nervous, but I know that the show must go on. So I just get the chance no matter what. And I need to prepare my best to present the best that I can do. So what I learned is that to know your modalities, I need to know the presentation or the presentation structure and the purposes. It's very important to always know the purposes of a presentation. So here I learned that in TED, they have slogan like ideas worth spreading. It means that I need to be convincing. I need to be maybe entertaining as well and be able to engage the audience into my presentation. So I'm thinking, how can I achieve those purposes? Yeah. So I need to be able to set up my context, to make sure that the audience understand why my research is important, why my research is significant, particularly in my context. And I try to relate the importance of my research into their context as well. Because my context, for example, at the time, I'm trying to argue that learning an additional language can be achievable through the use of stories. In my project, I teach English through stories. But here, because they speak English already, I need to convince them that if they want to learn other languages, I need to convince them that they can learn that quite easily through stories. So that's what I'm trying to highlight in my presentation. Now, after we got all the ingredients, now let's take a look at the cooking steps. Step 1. You need to outline and time your presentation. In the outline, I usually take the structure of a story, because I believe presenting a research is just like story itself. It requires a beginning, middle part, and the ending. And we need to time. We need to give time allotment for each part. Again, because we, by being aware with the time that we have, we can decide like how much information is enough. So you need to remember to go back to the first ingredient, yeah? So when we set up the time, we also need to think about the purpose of our presentation, who our audience are, and then the medium that we are involved in, what kind of medium that we can use. So this is the outline that I use when I prepared my 3-minute thesis competition. So when I set my presentation in 3 stages, the beginning, the middle, and the end, it's like a story. And at that time, because my project is about story itself, so I'm talking about story in a story outline. In the beginning, just like story, I introduce the big issue, why I need to do the research. And then I have to try to make sure that this issue is also relatable to my audience. And how can I do that? I used a character and also use an opening punchline. And if you like to know, you can go to a video of my 3-minute thesis competition in UOW. In UOW, I provided the link in my slides in the references, yeah. And then I also time, it's around 1 minute. And remember, this presentation only lasts for about 3 minutes. So after I introduce the big issue, I set up the context, and then I introduce and briefly explain the conflict, the debate that occurred in my context. So That's when I introduced the gap in literature review or in research methodology. So after I introduced the conflict, I started introducing the solution, what I did, how I did differently. So that's when I introduced my research methods, how I collected the data, how I did the intervention, and what about the results? And I showed the results towards the end of my presentation. And this is what I find interesting, is that I try to match the ending with the beginning that I set up. So because I show my character in the beginning with his problem that I solved through my intervention, and I show the result where the character that I introduced earlier can solve the problem, and thanks to the intervention that I did in my research. So that's how I try to convince my audience that my research is significant. My research is important. So I think even though you have anxiety, even though you always feel nervous about presenting in front of people, like what I often experience, but you need to be confident that you know what you are doing. You have to be confident that your research is important. Your work is significant. You have put effort and passion into your work. So it doesn't matter if you feel nervous. It doesn't matter if people judge you, but your job is to convince them. And of course, when you convince them, you have to think about strategies that can effectively achieve your target. So go back to this outline. I frame my presentation in a story, in a kind of fairy tale plot. But you can actually frame your presentation in a detective plot. And today, I frame my presentation in a recipe, in a cooking genre. I use analogy or example or words from cooking or from culinary world, yeah, using recipe, ingredients, or cooking steps, things like that. And you can create your own that suits you best, or maybe you can relate to your own hobby. Now, step 2. After you outline and time your presentation, you need to look at your slides again. See where you need to adjust the complexity of your work. As I mentioned earlier, when we talk about our field, we are comfortable using lots of technical terms. But remember, our audience come from different backgrounds, unless you know that they are all experts. So if you know that you have different kind of background of audience, you need to adjust. How can you adjust the complexity of your work? You can first identify technical terms and then use example. And you may also want to explain what those means that everybody can understand. Now I'm going to show you some snapshot from the transcription of Thomas Sow's 3-minute thesis presentation in Monash University. Yeah, his work is related to to health. Yeah, here the one in bold here. So those are the technical terms: cardiovascular, myocarditis, pericarditis, and then it's even hard to pronounce: encephalitis, pneumonia. Maybe those are things for people from medical schools, are the terms that they easily to say, that they can just easily say and they understand what those mean. But for lay people, for people who are not from that kind of school, might wonder what they are. So here, Thomas tried to explain what those terms mean, the one that I underline, yeah? These complications are life-threatening and are common in high-risk groups, such as children and elderly. So it doesn't matter whether the technical terms are hard to understand, but the audience can get the point at the end, which he explained. Those complication, those words hard to pronounce are actually life-threatening, are common in high-risk groups such as children and elderly. So we need to remember that we have responsibility to explain those complicated and sophisticated terms. And step 3, decide ways of involving audience. Yep. So what can we do? You can choose an inspiring quote that you like, which is relevant to your work. You can use the quote in the beginning. So it's not necessarily quote from a literature review, but if you like, you can do that as well. And then a quick survey, just like what I did in the beginning of this presentation, or use of character, just like what I did in my presentation for 3-minute thesis, and then use an anecdote. Or you can invite verbal and physical responses from the audience. For example, the simple one, you can say, okay, everyone, please raise your hands if you feel nervous before you do your oral presentation. So with that kind of simple command, just invitation to the audience, it already makes a difference to your presentation, rather than when you just go straight explaining kinds of anxiety before presenting a paper in front of lots of people. Yeah. Here's another example that I'd like to share with you. This is from Sohila Faki, also from Monash University. I have already put the reference at the end of my slides. Yeah. So I cannot see this. Wait. Imagine you are a 40-year-old overweight woman sitting watching television after a hard day at the office. You flick through the channels, wanting to watch something decent, only to find commercial breaks. To your amazement, every commercial is focused on one thing: weight loss. So I think I really like this beginning, because this presenter tried to engage the audience, to set up background, the importance of his research by telling an anecdote of a 40-year-old overweight woman. And maybe it is relatable to some audience, particularly like me. I'm also 40-year-old, and I can relate to this kind of story. Another example is from Philip Bergen, where he used a character to help him to talk about his research, to convince the audience that his research is important. So I believe in his slides, there's a picture of the patients. So as you can see here, the patients you see on the left, I think he meant on the left of the slide, represent actual patients. The patient top left developed a severe infection after undergoing a liver transplant. So from the very beginning, the audience has already been drawn their attention to this particular character, and we are invited to give empathy towards this patient. And maybe this case is also relatable to the audience. Yeah. And you might want to use other example relatable to your own experience, because basically when we tell story, we would like to make it more personal. Now I'm going to show you my experience in 3-minute thesis competition in University of Wollongong. What I did, the ways I engage my audience. I used the character in my research. So I used one of the respondents. So this is Jamal, not his real name. So I introduced his problem in learning English in Indonesia. And I also showed the audience what he wrote in English, which in terms of the quality, it's hard to understand unless you know the story, and then you know lalu kabur here. If you are Indonesian, of course, you will know what that means. but that's not what we expect from the product the students made in English class. And then I introduce the intervention that I did, and I also present the results, which is quite happy ending, because at the end of the program, he can successfully write a story in an understandable way. And I need to inform you as well that in 3-minute thesis competition, you can only use one slide. So I have to think as well. I need to make sure that my slide can really help me to send the message across to the audience that my work is important, that my research is significant. All right. Here is another example of how I engage the audience into my presentation. So this is the video that I took from my TED Talk presentation. Can you see the slide? Yeah, okay. Okay, I will play. Yeah.
Wanted to eat her. One day, Kancil the mouse deer wanted to get across to the other side of the river. But as you predict, there were so many crocodiles who were hungry and wanted to eat her. She said, "Hey, crocodiles, I know that you are all hungry and want to eat me. But look at you. There are..."
Okay, let me check. Can you hear the voice of the video? Yeah. Yes. So I think it's a bit lagging, yeah. Okay, here, because my project is about the use of stories in helping students to learn English, I want to convince the audience that that story can really help us to learn a new language or to learn additional language. And here, I try to involve the audience by pointing at them, by saying you, and you, and I assign them a character because I position myself as Kancil, and I pointed at them, at the audience, as crocodiles. At that time, when I pointed my finger to the audience, I feel that I have control of them, because at that moment, actually, I was really nervous. See, every time I do my presentation, I feel nervous, especially in the beginning. But that presentation in TEDx, I was nervous throughout the presentation. And I try to compensate my nervousness when I tremble by inviting them. But actually, I also planned that. But once I did that, when I pointed at them, that I know at that time that the audience were with me. So I have the power to move on. I know that when they are with me, it means that I don't have to worry about negative judgments of my audience about me. Okay, let's take a look at this video further.
So many of you and only one me. But don't worry. I will make sure that each and every one of you will get equal share of my body. I will count. I will jump on you, but don't eat me yet. And I will say what you'll get. And you will say it with me. Are you ready, crocodiles? Yes? I cannot hear you, crocodile. Are you ready? Good. Satu. Okay. Kepala. Dua. Tangan. Tiga. Kaki. And on, and on, and on.
Yeah. So here because I know that I have very limited time, 15 minutes, I cannot teach the whole lesson. I cannot tell the whole story to the audience, but I have purpose, and I want my audience to get the point that learning a new words in other languages can be done through story, and they can understand because it is wrapped up in a story. And I also use gesture. So as you can see from the video, the audience responded to me. So when I said tangan, kaki, those words might be the first words they heard in that presentation. And I was quite happy at that time because most of them participated or joined in my story. and they said Indonesian words that I tried to introduce to them. So that is only some examples of the interactions in your presentation. You might feel that, oh, that is too much. I cannot do that. I cannot point at the audience because it will be considered rude. I know that, but I frame that in a story. But if you think that uh, it is not relevant, or you don't feel comfortable of doing that, don't do that. Think of other thing that you feel more comfortable. Actually, you can learn lots of ways of inviting or engaging audience to your presentation. Just think about your capacity, your potential, what you are good at, and highlight that. And again, I know it's sometimes for me, for example, my experience as Indonesian, I feel a bit awkward if I have to show my strength. Mungkin seperti kayak Ria ya, mau menyombongkan diri. But for this moment, I think it's very important for us to know our strength, because it can help us to conquer our nervousness, our feeling of our anxiety, so that we can present in an interesting way and we can send our message across to our audience. Yeah.
I wanted to eat her.
Sorry. Yeah, and then what's the next step? The next step is the final one: practice, practice, practice. And if possible, practice, practice, practice. But what do you need to practice? You need to learn about the vocal range that you have. You might want to use like high pitch or very loud voice, or you just want to use your soft voice to introduce some words, or you want to share something very, very fast, or maybe you can say something quite so slowly. So learn about the vocal range that you have. And I know that some of you, or I know my best friend, for example, she doesn't have like very loud voice like I do. It sometimes gets her trouble when she tried to present her paper, especially in a big room. She needs to work really hard to project her voice. And actually, there are some trainings to help you to be able to project your voice. But if you want to know more, you can actually join the program in Balai Bahasa for speaking for academic purposes. Yeah, and then you can also use your body language. Learn. I mean, you practice your body language. Make sure that you don't use your hands too much, like this, waving your hands too much in the air, or you keep on fixing your hijab or touching your glasses, or maybe you're just playing with your hair or touching your nose, especially during this pandemic era. No, don't touch your nose or mouth quite frequently. Yeah, you can try to control your gesture and then your body language, and you can focus on certain gesture if you want to highlight certain meanings. Yeah. And what you can do is that you can record yourself, especially if you have to present in a very limited time, like 3-minute thesis competition, or 5 minutes, or the 15 minutes in a special event. Or you can just simply ask your friends to sit in front of you to give feedback when you do your presentation. So rehearsal is very important. Usually I rehearse for at least 2 times. At least 2 times but I need more. If for 3 minutes, for example, 3-minute competition, for 3-minute presentation, because time is very limited, I rehearse for so many times, because I always time myself. I need to make sure that I don't speak too fast, but I don't speak too slow, that I can exceed the time. But for presentation in a seminar or conference, I think you can just simply rehearse in front of mirror, and to make sure that you control your body language, your vocal range, the pace of your talk, something like that. Yeah. And if you like, you can look to the stars. just select any presenters that you like. You can go to YouTube and see how they do their presentation, what kind of ways that they use to engage the audience, what kind of voice that they use. Yeah, but again, the most important thing is that you practice. Yeah. So finally, you can present your compelling talk with confidence. Well, that concludes my presentation. Thank you. Now I'm waiting for questions or comments from you. Let's discuss further about this. Yeah. So can I just stop sharing? Please ask, you can write the questions in the question answer. Oh, ada suaranya double. Okay. From Teddy Saputra. Teddy, are you still there? If you like, you can turn on your video if you're comfortable, or you can just use your voice, or Pak bisa di ini masukkan ya jadi panelis.
Jadi kalau
ya.
Ibu menyebutkan siapa yang mau
Teddy Saputra. Teddy Saputra. Ada. Oh, Teddy Saputra raise hand nggak?
Silakan raise hand nanti saya.
Oke. Atau gini, silakan ini mungkin bisa dijawab. Ya. Ada? Teddy Saputra ada. Yes. Sebentar Teddy Saputra ya.
Oh, coba raise hand lagi.
Teddy Saputra, please raise hand again. Ya. Oh, okay. Or I can just answer ya. All right. Oh, tadi mana ya?
Sudah di panelis, sudah disebut.
Oh, udah.
Sudah di panelis.
Okay.
Tapi belum di.
Yeah, about cultural differences ya. Tadi your questions how tadi mana aku jadi hilang ya. How to manage cultural diversity and ethics, ma'am. Okay. Kalau menurut saya ya, so we need to know our audience, who our audience are, their cultural backgrounds. I will take a safe way. I'm not going to raise some issues that might be offensive. Something like religion, politics, because people have different kind of beliefs and their preference. So I will just avoid that kind of talk. So when I use, for example, when you use character in your research, and if it presents something very, very bad or negatively, for example, you talk about drug abuse or domestic violence, and then you use the character and the name is, you use Endang, for example, it might, I'm not going to use Endang as sexual abuser, for example, because it might offend people. But it's just an example. So I think I will think carefully when I try to give example, which is maybe quite sensitive for certain people. So just try to be safe and make sure that you don't touch sensitive topics. Yeah. And the next question is about how to control our nervousness when we see that audience seem bored or not interested in our presentation. Yeah, that's what I don't have here in online seminar like this. I don't know whether you are bored, because you have choice to just leave the screen and then do other things, like maybe you prepare your lunch, something like that. But actually you can invite your participants to your presentation. For example, here I try to engage you by checking the chat. I'm trying to make sure that you can see my slide, you can hear my voice. That's just one of the things that you can do to make sure that you are that the audience are with you. And how to control nervousness, I know that it can it's quite tricky because nervousness usually comes when you are not confident and you are not sure with what you're talking about. At the moment, I have quite constant anxiety because I don't really have enough knowledge in controlling this online environment yet, because this is my first time. So I still feel nervous. But how do I control this? I try to stick to the plan that I have already made and I have rehearsed. So I focus on the plan, on the dot points that I made in my slides. Yeah. Okay. Now let's see the question from YouTube. Yeah, from Danet P Suhadi. Oh, it's gone. Sorry. Maybe you can choose. Yeah. Danet Primandani, is it a good idea to have written notes beforehand, or is it more appropriate to memorize them? Oh yeah, thank you very much that you point this out. It's okay for you to have a script on your palm, or for example, when you present something and then you want to read, it's okay for you to read. But what you need to think about is that when you read, you have to make sure that you pay attention to your vocal range, the intonation. Make sure that it's not like deklamasi, baca puisi seperti anak SD. You make sure that the intonation is in the right. You use the intonation appropriately, and don't forget to make eye contact with the audience. So it's okay to read, but make sure that you check with your audience as well. You make eye contact with them. Memorize, again, it depends. If you are comfortable memorizing your presentation, and that is also okay. But for me, if I have to present something in quite long time, like now, for example, it will be very hard for me to memorize. But what I do usually is that I write. So in every slide, you know that there is a note, I will type what I'm going to say there. I might follow all the sentences that I use there, but I might not. I make some adjustment because when you do your presentation, things happen. But at least when you write your script, you help yourself to avoid grammatical mistakes. You help yourself to identify pronunciation that you are not really sure for certain terms, and then you can make sure with beforehand how to pronounce those words. Yeah. So there's another question from from Hamidah from UIN Sunan Ampel, Surabaya. Do we need to clarify all things in our presentation, or we give spaces for the audience to ask questions? It's your decision, actually. Remember, like, know how much information is enough. So it's your decision how much that you want to reveal, how much that you want to keep. But what you need to think about is, again, what is your purpose? If your purpose is to convince, then you need to take out all the things that can help you to justify your research, to make sure that everyone agree that your research is important. So about clarify all things, maybe you don't need to, like, for example, when I introduced the theory in the beginning of my presentation, I don't explain all the things about language model, even the terms used by Halliday himself. So I just select words that can be understandable, that can be understood well by my audience here. Yeah. Do we still have time, or it's actually finished? Okay, maybe one more question. Yeah. I'm Entin, teacher of SMKN 7 Bandung. Yeah. Is there any tips when we face blackout during presentation? Yeah, when you, yeah, I often experience that too. Even when I did the 3-minute thesis and also when I did the TED Talk, it happened to me, blackout. I don't know. So there's another tip that you can do actually. So when you prepare, you know that you outline your presentation. So you have to know where you are in your presentation. Are you in the beginning part, or are you in the middle part, or are you towards the end part? So if you are aware and you can make virtual picture of your presentation, just like for example, I made the outline, remember, with the curve like that. So I need to know whether I'm in the on the way to the climax or towards the end. And other presenters, from what I learned, is that they use, for example, an analogy to a house. So they will imagine that when they start the presentation, they are in the front yard, and then they entered the living room, and then to the kitchen, and then to the backyard where they can have party or something like that. So you can make your analogy to your presentation that can help you to be aware where you are during your presentation. Yeah. I know 1 hour is not enough, especially with this kind of environment. It's a bit hard to check, and I cannot see you really, so it's like I'm talking to myself. But yeah, I need to ask the committee whether, but it's yeah, because yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for joining this event. And if you like to learn and if you like to know more, you can contact Balai Bahasa, and we will prepare a program that can help you to present your paper, to present your research in oral presentation. We will help you with the visuals from the topic, and then how you engage with the audience, as well as how you explore your potential. Yeah. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oh, you may need to stay for exit ticket. Yeah.